to our latest episode of the She Speaks series from Let Her Speak. I'm Catherine Porth, founder of Let Her Speak, and today I have Jen Payne, who is a writer and a social entrepreneur. You probably saw a little bit of her story in 2020 when we were sharing a little bit of a pretty difficult time that she was having to go through due to the pandemic and the changes in the landscape of the work that she was trying to accomplish. So I'm so glad, Jen, that you're here with us today so we can catch up and see what you're up to now.
Thanks. It's
Uh,
great
so,
to be here.
yeah, I'm so glad that you are here to share with us everything that you've been working on and where you see everything expanding for you. I would love for you to first talk a little bit about what your journey has looked like from the beginning of 2020 to where we are now in 2021.
Sure. So at the beginning of 2020, I owned a cafe and a live music venue in a very small town in upstate New York. And I also was the director, still am technically the director of a nonprofit. Our cafe was a community cafe. The premise was that nobody in the community should go hungry. So we offered a number of different solutions for people who maybe didn't have the means to come in and eat, and maybe were living with some, food shortage at home. They could come in. We had two options. One was called our community meal, which members of the community would purchase, and then we would just have available when somebody was in need. They could come in and they could say, "Hey, could I get a community meal?" And then we would just feed them. And that we always had an abundance of those. We had a very generous community and it was wonderful. And then the other option for people was to come in and do service for food. So they could come in and help us in the cafe. They could do dishes. There's always floors to sweep, tables to clean. But we also had community partners, the library and the food bank and a couple other places. So if these people went and helped there, they could come in and get a meal for that. So just giving service for food. And that was a very successful, really sort of heartwarming program that I was just so grateful to get to be part of. So we opened the community cafe in March of 2019. 1 year to the day from when we opened, Governor Cuomo here in New York, put New York on pause due to the coronavirus, which we were anticipating. We were following the virus. We knew what was happening. We were ready for it. We were a little worried because we were in a very small town and we were brand new, but we were thinking it was going to be okay. We did some community outreach program stuff. We did some, people could do curbside pickup for prepped meals that they could go home and prepare. And so we were doing a few things. But then the quarantine and the New York on pause just continued. And then it was June and we still weren't able to be open yet, like fully. And when we were going to be able to be open, it was very cut back. And I say we, but really it was me at that point. My partner had sort of just kind of was overwhelmed with everything that was happening and had just sort of pulled back, which I get. And I sort of looked at the state of our town. We have 1,700 residents, mostly under the poverty line, very dependent on tourism, and sort of the state of our finances, where we were going to be able to go. And we made the choice to close. We just didn't think that was what the community was going to need when everything sort of came back to life. They were going to need more, and they were not going to be able to support that sort of big program anymore. So we made the decision to close in June, and that meant that I lost all of my businesses. The live music venue obviously is still can't be a thing. but it was attached to the cafe. We ran the nonprofit from upstairs in the cafe, and then I also lived upstairs. So all of the businesses, also my massage practice, which is sort of like an incidental thing at this point, was in another area of that same building. So one building in a very small town, my whole life was all there. And so we left that behind. And there was a good couple of months where I didn't really know what was going to happen or what to do, how to, I stayed sort of in the community to try to figure out how we could help, what people were going to need. And there was just no way to know. The needs were changing from one day to the next. And then I had to think about sort of what my family was going to need. And so we actually made the decision. We moved about 30 minutes away from that tiny town, and I started to write. And so that's where that came from, because I didn't know, I just needed to say something. I had a lot to say, and I didn't know how to get it out there. And a friend of mine actually shared something on Facebook that he had written on medium.com. And so I went to the website and was like, I could do this. I've got a lot to say. So I started writing there. And that's what I do now. I built a website and did a bunch of other stuff too, but that's it's not the bulk of what I do. Mostly I write.
And I love the power of just keeping going in your story, because I know the unfortunate thing is that the story of having to leave that life behind is not necessarily unique for
Right.
what a lot of people have had to face over the last year now
Yep.
of what's been going on. But the fact that there's an element of reinvention and self-determination that's built into a lot of the stories that are coming out, yours included, I just think is incredible. Is there, as far as your writing is concerned, I know you write about a lot of different topics, but is there any writings in particular that you have shared so far that you're particularly fond of?
Yeah. So what happened? The first thing that I put out on Medium was very personal. And as I started sort of reading and spending my time thinking about, like, how can I use this writing that is helping me right now? How can I use this to help somebody else? Because that's sort of, for me, the big question, like, what's the meaning of life? It is just to live it, to enjoy it, and to help other people to do the same thing. So I became very, like, more passionate about helping sort of marginalized groups, including, women, people of color, that sort of thing. And so I started writing about that marginalization in my area. So I live in upstate New York, in a circuit of very small towns. The largest city, I think, is probably Rochester, within an hour of me. But, that's literally an hour away. We have towns of 1,700 people, 2,500 people, that size, mostly farms, lots of farmland. And I think the community that I live in right now, 97% white. There's not a lot of minority. There's not a lot of diversity at all. At all. And so I started writing about that and what it's like to be here, either as sort of a marginalized person, being a woman, like what it's like to live here as a woman, which, we had talked about before, like we're not taught that we can have control of our finances or make big decisions. Moving away when I was 20 was huge. Most of my family was actually angry at me. Like you're expected to just graduate, maybe go to college, but close by, somewhere near here, and then come back to here, settle down, get married, have some kids. That's what you do. There's no um there's no real other option. And when you create another option for yourself, it's a big deal here. So I wrote about that. And then I wrote about the piece that I think has gained the most traction and spawned the most additional writing, was called Racism Through the Eyes of Rural White America. And I've had people say to me, that's a made up story, right? Or nice straw man story. Like, no, I mean, the racism and the prejudice and the bias here is real. And it's not bad people, it's just a lack of information. And so that's what I really want to get out there, and what I really want to share is that this area and other areas like it in the United States, because I've lived outside of here for over a decade in lots of places, and there's not a lack of empathy, there's just a lack of knowledge. And I don't like to use the word ignorance because it's got such a bad connotation these days. And I think because people sort of equate ignorance with willful ignorance, and that's not what it is. There's just no experience with anything different here. And because of that, there's a lot of pushback to anything different. So anyway, yeah, that's what I think I find the most rewarding, is sharing those sort of stories with
And
a world that just doesn't believe them sometimes.
yeah, and I think that's why, because I read most of, I don't normally comment or anything, but I usually read most of what you share.
Thank you.
And I think partially, one of the reasons I keep reading a lot of it too is because your experience in upstate New York is extremely similar to my experience growing up in Eastern Iowa, because it is also predominantly white area. It is very similar in that, most people are pretty kind
Mhm.
people. They're good natured, but they just don't understand anything different
Exactly.
from what their lives have been like. And it's the exact same thing. I'm the only one in my family who doesn't live within 35 minutes of everybody else.
Yep.
I went to school out of state, which was like a big deal. And when I decided to come back, it was like the happiest day in my mom's life. And when I
Mhm.
decided to leave again, she barely said goodbye and didn't help me pack. She
Yeah.
was not happy that I was moving again.
Yeah. I get
Uh,
that.
yeah. But yeah, it's the same thing. Everybody stays close by and stays in their pods of family. And family is very important, which I get.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
yeah, but it is a lot of the topics that, people are getting a little bit more open to talk about it are still very, very difficult to breach with, a lot of people back home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm finding here the people in my area, who are sort of like in my circle, who read my writing, then come to me and they're just like, the rest of the world isn't, as different as you think it is. And, all of this stuff. And they're very defensive about it. They're like, and I try to make them understand, you know, the rest of the world actually is really different. And if you would just look outside this tiny little circle, you would see that, and it's okay to do that. But I don't know that I've lost friends, but I've lost some connections over it, I think. Um, which is sad, but my hope is that the more people speak, the more people will hear, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's something that's always difficult, and it's always something in the back of your mind that you're fearful of, well, if I start speaking up, how many people will I lose?
Yes.
And changing that perspective of when I start talking about things that I actually care about, and that are written on my heart that I need to get out, how many people will I finally know were not the right people to probably have around me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just published a piece on boundaries that sort of applies to all of that. That if you have to set your own boundaries, but and also you have to be willing to speak your own truths and to say what's on your heart. And sometimes people will walk away, and sometimes people will surprise you, and well, that's what I shared in the piece that I just wrote, is that I was very surprised when I set some pretty firm, hard boundaries with somebody. They came back with, I love you. And okay, I was blown away. But it was a big, important lesson to me. It was, about 10 years ago that it happened. And it really changed the way that I operated, because I realized that I could set boundaries. And if people really cared about me, then they would respect them.
Hmm.
So, and it's the same thing. If people really care about you, they'll listen to what you have to say, even if it doesn't change their mind, even if they don't agree, they will listen and say, it's okay that you feel that way. And that's really cool. That's one of the things. The first event of yours that I ever attended was the imposter phenomenon event. And that still sticks with me, seeing these women, like hearing their stories of all the amazing things that they were doing and who they were. And I mean, powerful, intelligent, wonderful women who were like, oh yeah, I'm totally faking it. Mm. No, I'm petrified every day. And I'm like, wait, what? You are? Because I am too. It's amazing to once you start to share, the people that will go, me too. You know, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I think that's if I had to put a theme to the more positive things that have come from all of us collectively being in quarantine and going through this major, traumatic event that we're all going through, it's the power of courage
Mhm.
and the power of boundaries.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize, I picked that topic, and I think I mentioned this, that I had no idea what I needed to be doing, events around, what the topics needed to be, until I started doing my state of mind for women study,
Right.
and figured out that the number one thing was our major barrier for most of us is our own negative self-perception is usually what stops us.
Yep.
And I think that then that's when the bell rang of like, oh, I think all of us all feel like because, and I think social media doesn't help. Obviously, we put out our best
Absolutely.
selves out on social media. So
Mhm.
of course, all of us will naturally feel like we're faking it, and that we don't deserve to be here, and we're failures because we think from the perspective that, oh no, she's doing it all, she has it all
Yeah.
together.
Yep.
When in fact, like, I think it's estimated at least 70% of the human population suffer from imposter syndrome.
Right. Yeah. We're all just faking it till we make it,
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's true. Social media plays such a huge role in how we see ourselves and how we see the world. But it's like when you do find that one, person on social media or something that like shares their actual real life, it's like either you're so drawn to it, or you're like, oh, like that's too much information. I didn't want to know that. And that always, I'm like, when I read comments and I see people saying that, like, why are you putting this out there? Because that's some real stuff, and I follow a couple women who I consider to be leaders, who are just amazing, who just put their real stuff out there all the time. And it's so moving. And I don't have that kind of courage yet, but that's like one of the things I aspire to, you know?
Yeah. I would agree. I think a lot of us aspire to have that courage to actually say what's going through our minds, or what's happening in our
Yeah,
lives.
like in real time. Like
Yeah.
here's, you pull up an Instagram and it's like this, person just a wreck and they're like, here's why. And if you're going through this too, you're not alone. And I'm like, man, that's that's good.
Yeah, I think it's what's interesting too is like it's almost like that by another woman doing that, it's giving permission. And I think some of us feel like we have to be given permission in order
Mhm.
to speak and say what's going on.
Yeah,
I mean, one thing that's really interesting, and it's a little bit of I guess you could say it's a phenomenon, is like if you are in a group setting of a mixture of men and women, and it's about 50-50. There's studies that have shown that most of the time, if it's a 50-50 mix, predominantly men will be doing most of the talking in that group setting,
sure.
and women won't be. And it's almost like you need that first woman to step up and start talking, and then to pull another woman and be like, what do you think? And it's like once these other women feel like they have the permission to talk, then
Mhm.
we'll start talking. But it takes the one brave, courageous woman to actually be the first to say something.
Yes, absolutely. And I have to, so when I was 20 years old, I moved to California. And I wanted to get a job right away. I got married. And um so I signed up with this temp agency and I got a job at an insurance agency right downtown San Diego, right on the bay, like 13th floor or something. And I was so intimidated, coming from my tiny little town with like 1,500 people. And I was like, oh my goodness, I went and bought my first like business suit. And um, I was I was there and they were so warm and so welcoming. And I ended up getting hired on full time. I was hired as a assistant to one of the VPs. So part of my job was to sit in the board meeting and take notes for him. And I noticed that this is a room full. It's almost all men, but there's like five women, and none of the women said a thing. Like the first two meetings, no woman spoke other unless she was asked a direct question. And I was like, man, is this like, aren't we past this? And then there was a six women. There were six women and seven men who were like the VPs and then the president of this company. The sixth woman had been on like extended vacation or something. She came back. Her name was Dorothy, and she was a powerhouse. In every meeting she was in, she was one of the first to speak, and then everybody engaged, all the women, all the men, everybody. And at one point, I think it might have been the president, but I can't really remember for sure. But he said, one of them said, Dorothy, we really missed you. These meetings are awful quiet when you're gone. And I was like, I want to be that woman. Like, that's what I want in my life. Turns out I didn't actually want to sit in boardrooms, but I still hold on to that. I take a lot of pride in that. I'm the woman that will speak up. And I owe her a huge debt of gratitude because she's the one that gave me permission. You're absolutely right. Like if I had if she hadn't come in, my assumption would have been you're supposed to just sit there and answer questions.
Yep, exactly. We all need a Dorothy. I
Yeah.
think. I feel
Yeah.
like most Dorothys also come to think, but a lot of Dorothys I know are just powerhouse people. I have an Aunt Dorothy who's just an
Ooh,
awesome lady. So,
yeah.
and yeah, yeah, and I mean Dorothy Gale from The Wizard of Oz.
Sure.
Dorothy's are cool. Dorothy's
Dorothy's
are
are
cool.
cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. She,
um,
she was a little thing. She was short. She was a powerhouse.
That's so cool. And it's something that I've slowly kind of realized as I've started actually just observing what's going on, that I don't know why we feel like we need permission. I don't know if you have any thoughts on why there is this thing of like, don't speak until you're invited to.
Right.
I
Um,
yeah.
there's I think that, or I hope that the next generation of women will not need that same permission, because my hope is that our generation is giving it to them as they're young. I have nieces who are um, growing up right now, and that's what my hope is for them. And I have sons, and my hope is that they will not take that away from women. But I think that at least for our generation, I was sort of raised that way. It was, and it wasn't because I was a woman that I didn't see it that way as a kid, but I think that that's what it was. I was just from a very early age taught, like, shh, you're talking too much. I remember hearing that as a kid. You're talking too much. Can you be quiet? And I think it didn't work because I still tend to talk a lot, but and of course, looking back, it's like, I don't know, did my cousins that were boys get told that? I don't remember them being told that, but I don't know. But I know that I've always felt like I should, if I'm in a group of people, I should wait until, shh, just wait. And then Dorothy.
I think that's really good. You saying that was bringing back memories of I was also extremely talkative, and I was the one that had to sit out at recess in second grade because I talked during class too much. And I think that just started beating me down to the point of like, well, if I don't say anything, then I don't get in trouble, I guess.
Yep.
And then to pull yourself back out of that. And it is interesting that I think boys are told to maybe sit down but not to be quiet.
Right.
I just remember our boys in our classes would just be up and they'd be rambunctious and stuff.
Yep.
They wouldn't be talking, they would just be doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And I think you're right. I think because of what a lot of us, every generation is trying to at least pave the way for the next.
Yeah.
So the best, hopefully we're kind of showing that no, speaking up is a good thing, and
Yeah.
talking is a good
Yeah.
thing.
And I think the other thing is we've really made a lot of progress, I think, in changing a language that I think was really detrimental to women of our generation, which is like, if a woman either, got angry or got loud in public or something, there were certain words that were used. She was crazy. She was, she was nutty. And it's like, no, she was angry. There's a difference, and I know for me that I can remember times when my uncles would say this about the women in their lives, oh my God, there she goes again. Like, well, because she's feeling something, like, just listen to her. But that's not how they were raised. And so they didn't. And my hope is that I'm raising my sons to listen when a woman speaks, and that I'm helping to teach my nieces that they can speak, and it's okay. If you're angry, it's okay. Unless you're, don't be disrespectful to somebody, right? Don't call names and that sort of thing. But it's okay to be angry. It's okay to speak out. It's okay to be passionate. Because that was the other thing. I would get really excited, and when I was young, and people say, "You're so loud. Can you be quiet?" Well, I'm excited. I'm sorry. So then, for a lot of years, I didn't get excited. I didn't get loud. I was very stoic and very quiet. And I'm super glad I changed that.
I feel like you and I would have gotten along really well as kids, because I was also the loudest in my class.
Yeah.
And, people would come from the hallway and be like, Catherine, I can hear you all the way down the hallway. And it's like,
Yes.
well, for one thing, I had a dad who, my parents were much older and my dad didn't hear so well. So like I had to talk loud at home. Otherwise my dad would never hear a thing I said. And I didn't understand how to change my volume when I was at school around people who could actually hear like
Sure.
normal.
Right. Yeah. See, and my dad worked in a garage. he worked in a factory, was his day job, but he was always in the garage at home. And it was loud in there. He had an air compressor going.
Mhm.
And my dad is just a naturally loud. He's got like that big booming voice whenever he speaks,
Mhm.
And I guess I get it from him. Although my mom's pretty loud lady. But yeah, that I remember hearing the same thing. Jen, I can hear you all the way down the hall. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's just it's amazing how these you start as you get older and you start reflecting back on like, well, why am I like this, or why is my knee jerk reaction to something like that? Because I remember as I got older and I would be talking to someone and I would feel like they weren't fully giving me their attention, I would start getting really angry about that. And I was like, I don't know why I am taking such offense to somebody not acting like they're listening to me or
Right.
engaging with what I'm trying to say. And I started peeling back of like, oh no, this started way back when I was a little kid, and I
Yep.
felt like nobody was listening to what I had to say, and I had to be quiet and like not really there.
Right. Yeah. Like you're not going to be heard. So, don't speak. Yeah, absolutely. My youngest son, he's 11, and his dad is in a relationship with a woman who has three children who are younger. So he's like gone from being the youngest in the family to being the middle child. And when that sort of first started, I saw some changes in his behavior that were very clearly attention getting. I want attention, is what he was saying, and I went to his dad and I went to his girlfriend, who's now his fiance, and I said, hey, we got to do something with this. And so we all made a very concerted effort to stop what we were doing when he came out to tell us something, or, and he's like me, he's a talker, and his stories will take, 10 minutes when I'm like, you could have said that in 30 seconds, kid, but so we all agreed we're going to make a concerted effort and we'll put down what we're doing or we'll stop what we're doing and we'll listen to him. And, his fiance is a teacher, and she's like, if you could like get down and like look at him or sit down next to him so you're making eye contact. And I mean, it took like 2 weeks of us all doing that. And he was back to being his normal, regular self, not attention seeking, not acting out. But, then we just have to be aware. And I still do it when he comes out to tell me something. I either have to say, like, buddy, I only have a second because I'm cooking and I can't, I have to keep doing this or I'm going to burn our dinner. And then he understands, or I stop what I'm doing and I'm like, tell me what's going on, dude. And I think actually it's been good for me too because I feel more connected to him, which is nice. But it's like my parents wouldn't have, they didn't, that just wasn't part of parenting. You didn't take that. You didn't go like, why are you acting out? You were like, knock it off or you're punished. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
There was no attempt at figuring out what was happening in our little tiny human heads. We were children, which doesn't, children and human was different back then. And I think that has changed for most people now. And I think that's a very good thing.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, and kudos to you and your husband and his fiance for just understanding that and realizing, because it's so easy to just be like, knock it off, and you
Right.
just keep trying to, and you more so get frustrated that they're changing the dynamic of what you're used to your day-to-day life being like.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what is this? What are you doing? What is the problem? But it didn't, it was like, oh, it just clicked. And I'm very lucky. Their dad is excellent and his fiance is amazing. Um, I have to say that because she's actually my sister, but but she really is amazing. That's another story you can read on my Medium, is that my ex-husband fell in love with my sister and I'm happy about it.
That's right. I forgot about that
Yeah.
story.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah, she's so amazing and she's so good with the kids and they're the happiest couple you'll ever see. It's a little sickening, to be honest. Yeah, but I feel very lucky because well, not only do I get a stronger relationship with my sister sort of in general, but like right now during all this quarantine and stuff, because we share the kids, we sort of share households. So I get to see my sister even when I don't get to go visit anybody else in my family. Even when things are crazy, we still are, we all share the same germs because we share kids. So I have gotten to like have birthdays and Christmases with my sister, when, a lot of people are not getting that. So I've been really lucky, actually. This is a huge blessing in our lives.
Yeah, and I remember that story of, just for one thing, you you know s- even sharing it, and because I think, some people would feel like, oh, people are going to judge me for this, they're not going to understand, they're going to think it's weird.
Yeah.
And I so appreciated that, for one thing, being somebody that didn't know anything about it, it also makes you want to sit and just be like, there is a story to everything. And so if all anybody ever took was, oh, your ex-husband is marrying your sister, oh, what happened there, this must
Right.
be super dramatic and all these
Right.
other things, and
Yeah,
it's
they
like,
assume we have like this Jerry Springer life.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, everything's Jerry Springer, right?
Yeah.
But I love that you were like, no, like this is a good thing, and
Oh, it's so
to,
good.
almost bring a sense of normality, of like, this is just something that happens and it's not
Yeah.
a bad thing.
Yeah. And I mean, so their dad and I had separated like when my youngest was barely 6 months old. So we had been apart for almost a decade. Well, I guess for like 8 years or something when they first started to see each other. And they had both, so their dad, my ex-husband, had remarried to somebody else, and that had gone poorly at the end. So, and he was really having a hard time. And then my sister also had gone through a separation with the father of her children, and she was just a wreck. And they found comfort together. And I think like they sort of saw what was happening, um but they really tried not to let it happen, I think, at first, because of exactly what you were saying, like people are going to judge this, like this is going to be weird. But then, their feelings were just not something they could ignore anymore. And I remember saying to both of them when they each came to me separately and were like, so this is happening, uh I was like, I mean, I want you guys to be happy. Just remember that we still share family. So if it goes south, like y'all better be grown-ups. But like I knew that they would be, you know,
Mhm.
and it didn't take very long seeing them together that I also knew it wasn't going to go south. Like they are just meant for one another. It's wild. It's so good. But I will say there are some in our family that they still sort of hold resentment against him, whether it's because of how he was when we were married, which was not bad. He wasn't a bad husband. He was a great guy. Just we got married very young and it didn't work out. But we had two kids and we're like practically best friends. Like he's a great guy. And my family, I thought, sort of understood that. But then when it started, when he became involved with my sister, my family sort of stopped being so understanding, some of them anyway. So she's really struggling with that right now, with dealing with some of our family that's just like, what are you doing? This is terrible. Um, so again, I feel really lucky that I get to be part of it, and remind her that the people that really care and really love you are going to support you, and that's it.
Right.
People, I guess I just can't like grasp this whole idea of conditional love. Like I'm only going to be here for you if you do what I want you to. That just that's not written on my heart. That doesn't ring true for me. So I feel really lucky though. They're pretty amazing. We
Yeah.
got a great family.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And I think the thing is again, going back to like talking openly about your situation and about your family, is that I think a lot of families have complexities, maybe not exactly like that, but have some other sort of complexity that they
Right.
feel like nobody will ever understand. Because I know, at least with like my family, I have three older brothers that are all half brothers, and my dad's son, who's the youngest, but he's 13 years older than me, so I'm
Wow.
very much the baby. His mom is a huge part of our family, and she's at all the gatherings and everything, and I never thought to even think that that was weird, that my dad's they were never married, but they had my brother together, that her being around all the time and being a part of our lives and being very close to us was a strange thing.
Right.
Because like her and my mom get along really well, and I really really like his mom. She's actually a huge supporter of all the work that I do and
Oh, that's so
everything.
cool.
Yeah, and
That's
so
so great.
to like say it out loud and explain to people like the complexity of like who this woman is and how she relates to the rest of our family, it probably it seems odd, but I know a lot of other people have
Yeah.
probably something complex, and families are just complex. They are.
Yeah, exactly. They really are. And and that's just the nature of human beings, I think. But like it speaks to, what a great woman your mother is and what a great woman his mother is and, what a great man your father is, that they could, you know, all come together and say, okay, well, it turns out we've got kids together and so we got to do this thing. So let's get along and oh, wait, we like each other, you know? Because I think that my ex-husband, the boy's dad, and I, we have said if we didn't have kids, we probably wouldn't have stayed friends, right? We probably would have said, all right, see you later, and seen each other around because we are both from this small town, but we did have kids, and there's nothing to me more important than my kids, right? And I'm not going to ever say anything bad about their dad. Because first of all, and I wish that some other, I wish that I could get this across to some people, but I made the choice to be with him. If I talk bad about him, I'm really talking bad about me here. Like sometimes we make mistakes, right? And so it's fine to say like I made a mistake, this was a bad choice, but now I have a child, so here we are. But like I was married to this man for a decade. He's a good dude. um and you said like your dad and her had not gotten married but they had a kid, and it's like, oh well, now we're family. And family's family. Sorry.
Yeah,
you just
exactly.
you just end up stuck with them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For better, for worse, they are forever going to be a part of you.
Yeah,
Um,
that's so cool that she's so supportive of what you're doing too.
oh yeah, I mean, every time we visit, she sits me down and she wants to know everything that I'm working on. So
That's so
it's
cool.
really cool. Yeah, yeah. So I'm really glad that she's a part of the family, and regardless of how she became a part of the family, it
Right.
doesn't really matter.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but I do feel like that's something, the complexities of the family dynamics is something that people don't talk about, or the complexities of issues of sometimes it's bouts of mental health issues within the family that we don't openly talk about, yet we probably all have a story that we can relate to on it. So it's unfortunate that we kind of built this system of shame around something that happens to almost everybody.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. My sister, the reason that she sort of started talking with the boys' dad, she was going through postpartum depression. She had had twin girls and she was struggling. And our family, that's not something you talk about and that's really sort of this area dynamic. That's another level of it. If something's wrong, you keep that to yourself. Like that is not something you talk about. And a therapist, like going to a therapist, you're crazy now. Like that's mm-mm. um and so she finally admitted to me, I think I'm depressed. She's like, I don't enjoy anything. something's wrong. And I said, I would love for you to go and talk to him because he has some experience in this. And I think um, for her, because we were like the people in the family who had left the small town, we were outside, and to have somebody say to her, it's okay. It's okay that you, first of all, feel this way at all. There's nothing wrong with you. This isn't something that you've done or that you deserve. There's no, and, but it's okay and it's okay that you're admitting that you have a problem because now you can get help. And now, that's really the first step, right? Is saying something's not right. And so to hear that from somebody who's not just her sister, right? Because obviously I'm going to say, like, honey, it's going to be okay. But I said, I think I'm too close. I can't be objective and help you through this. And, I thought maybe therapy, but that was very scary to her. And also, she was working, raising her children, newly single, going to school for her master's. She was like, exactly when am I going to fit therapy into my life? I don't know. I don't know that one. But to hear somebody else who cared about her also, he was like a brother to her for a long time. Um, and then to have somebody say, you didn't do this. This is something that is going on with you, but you're not broken. You're okay. And it's okay that you feel this way. And then on, some encouragement, she went and talked to her doctor and took some medication for, actually for a pretty short amount of time. And now she has a real connection with her own mental health. Now she can look and say, you know what? I'm not having a good day. And this is something that I need to talk to somebody about. Or she can say to our family, who is really putting a lot of stress on her right now, what you're doing to me is like not okay. The guilt trips that you're giving me are actually like a form of abuse, just so you know. So I think and that's huge. And of course, now what's happening is she's like, maybe I don't want to live in this small town forever. Like, well, I get it. But, because once you see the world outside of it, it's like, oh, why is everything so hard? Why is everything so closed off? It's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so wonderful that at least she had at least one person
Yeah.
that she could go to tell her, like, no, what you're feeling is valid,
Yep.
and you have worthiness of doing whatever needs to be done to help yourself.
Yeah. And, she was feeling that sort of postpartum depression. And then in the midst of it, this partner who had been her partner since high school left, just up and left, and was with somebody else, of course. So that made her even feel like that's because I'm this way. I'm sad and I'm not happy and I'm, so I did that. And it was like, no, that's not what happened. And so to have somebody else, outside of her immediate family say, you're amazing and you're beautiful and I want to talk to you and I like having you around, even if you don't want to put clothes on and you want to wear your pajamas and you haven't taken a shower in 2 days and all you want to do is eat ice cream and cry, I still want to be with you. That like made such a huge impact on her. And I learned, and this was only like like a little over 3 years ago that this happened. So I was 37 at the time. And I watched this happen and I went, it is okay to talk about what's happening that's not pretty. I was by then already a mental health advocate for people, but I didn't talk about my own. I could tell other people it was okay, but I watched my sister heal so quickly because somebody said it's okay. And, that made a huge impact on my life. And I have a partner now who I can do that with. who says to me, it's okay that you can't keep your shit together today. Sorry. I don't know if I should say that, but that's what he says. It's okay. You don't have to. I'm still here. So that's a huge thing for people. It's beautiful.
It is. It is absolutely the embracing of the beauty in the imperfect
Yeah.
is something that I hope I know that it's starting to rise to the surface of celebrating the beauty and just being a human.
Yeah.
And I really,
Yeah.
really hope that continues, that momentum continues
Yeah.
of the toxicity that a lot of us have tried to pull ourselves out of. That there's
Absolutely.
beauty in what the human spirit has endured.
Yeah. Yeah. And because there's so much stigma attached to so many things. And especially, coming from a small town, it's like tenfold. Anything, cities or, urban areas, like they start to make these changes and things start to happen, and it takes a decade before it reaches us. But
Easily.
this movement, I think, is spreading faster than other things that I've seen, and I'm so glad because there's so much stigma attached to so many things that so many humans go through.
Hmm.
And if we can just remember that we're all human, and by default we are imperfect,
Right.
that just goes such a long way.
Yeah,
um,
I agree.
and I love what you're doing, because connecting women like that to see um, other women who, I can go on social media and I can go on their websites and I can see what they're doing and I can see that they're these amazing women, and then to have them, sit at these round tables that you have and confess that like their life isn't actually perfect and they're actually in slippers right now. And I had one woman at the last thing, she was like, oh yeah, I'm in slippers. Like I put a jacket on real quick so you guys wouldn't know. To see that, because, and I think that's one of the, you were talking about the blessings of, or the, the bright spots of what's happening in our world right now, but we get to see people now that haven't necessarily gotten their face on to go out to public.
Hmm.
People are starting to say, well, if I have another Zoom meeting today, you're going to have to see me the way that I am. So, deal with that. And it's actually so moving and so empowering. And I love that what you're doing is bringing that to so many people, because I mean, it's like I said, it's made a huge difference just in my world, and I've only attended 2 events. It's like just to see other women be imperfect, because, and I think, I say all humans, but I think that for men there has been more leeway for a longer.
Hmm.
Men were allowed to get angry, allowed to have, their whatever, but also at the same time, they're allowed to get angry, but they're not allowed to get sad.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
there's that too. And if we just can start to recognize that we're all human, and all the whole gamut of human emotion that we feel, in the bathroom, in the shower, in privacy, other people feel too, you know. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool stuff.
It is. It's really cool. It's really cool. Well, to thank you so much for everything that you shared today. I feel like we hit on a lot of different topics that I love for you to be able to share those aspects of your story. And the last thing though that I would love to hear, and I know that this might morph over time, but what right now do you want your legacy to be that you leave behind?
Um, that's such a great question. And I think that, I think all parents, we say, we want our legacy to be our kids. But at the last event that I was at with you, I thought, I learned really that it can be more than that. Like I can have my own legacy and then they can have theirs also. So I've spent actually a lot of time thinking about it. And I think what I want my legacy to be is kindness and gratitude. I want, if people look back and they think about Jen Payne, I want them to say, she was really a kind person. And I hope that when people come away from any sort of learning experience with me, that's what they take, is that gratitude does really change the way that you see the world and the way that you exist in the world.